All right. Well, thank you for sticking around to the end. Congratulations. 2 days of learning. I'm sure your heads are like hurting a little bit. So one piece of advice, I've been doing trade shows and conferences and events, and I've like you sat there and I've taken notes. And then what do? We go home and we take those prize notes with key learnings and all that stuff we do, and we sit it on our desk and we go back to our day job. And do we ever look back at those notes? Nope. And so what I want you to do, when I'm done talking today, I want you to text yourself, Slack yourself, Teams, Discord, I don't care, whatever, pick a platform that you're going to look at, one idea that you are going to implement when you get home. One thought, that's it. Because if you don't do anything else other than that one idea, this event was still successful, right? So just a piece of advice, since I'm the last one, I get to share some wisdom. I don't know. I'm making stuff up. Here's the clicker. All right. My name is Zach Winthy, and I am the CDP evangelist for Treasure Data. I work in the marketing, the product marketing org, which is part of our marketing org. And my job is to go out and kind of share, what is a CDP? What do we do? But more importantly, I'm a marketer, and I talk to marketers. And when I joined Treasure Data, I said, look, I'm willing to come on board. I'm willing to do this if we actually title this as an evangelist. And it took some conversations of like, well, isn't that a founder? And isn't that what is that? And I'm like, no, I have an idea. And thankfully, my boss was an amazing person, and she went along with it. And so today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the rise of the PMM evangelist, why this is the perfect role for your product marketing teams. But before I jump in, a little bit of a story. So recently, my grandmother passed away. And now this is not a sad story. This is actually a happy story. She lived an amazing life. And we got to get together and have an opportunity, as family to talk about stories and things we remembered. And one of the ones that I thought of at the time was when I was 4 years old and my parents were leaving to go to the hospital to have my brother. Well, my mom was. My dad was just tagging along. But they were going, and I was not happy. I did not want to be left there. I wanted to go with. As if you have kids, you understand how this goes, right? I was throwing the most livid fit probably possible, or at least that's what they told me. My grandmother came over to stay, and she had bribed me with dinner and a movie. And we were going to watch a movie after dinner. Now, this is 1985, so it wasn't like we turned on Netflix. It was like whatever was on TV that night. I didn't know any better. I was just happy to watch a movie. And what we watched was The Wizard of Oz. And at four and a half years old, I was enthralled. I spent the next year talking about this movie and everything that happened in it and explaining it to it like people hadn't seen a movie that came out in 1939. Like, this was like new world to me. And every year, I grew up in the Midwest, every year for some reason in February, they replayed this on TV. And so I got to remember that moment of how much I loved this movie, how much I hated my brother, but that's a different story. No, I'm just kidding. But I got to remember this. And so when I was preparing for this presentation, I thought it was only appropriate that I use The Wizard of Oz as an example. And so often when we think of evangelism, and when we think of somebody out there spreading the message, we have the big scary head talking, and it's usually our executives. And they are the founders, and that works. And there's a reason for that. It's because they're passionate. They can do it naturally. The reality is, and I found often, not just my personal role, but with others, is there is actually a man behind the curtain or a woman behind the curtain, and it's the product marketing team. Right? We're pulling the levers. We're helping create the narratives. We're doing the positioning. And sometimes we need to step out from behind the curtain and just own the story. And so, hopefully today I can kind of convince you that owning the story is important. And when you do, you can take a loving band of characters and you can provide your marketing team with a message that they had in their heart all along, but they just didn't realize till the end. And you can help your customer success team have more heart and more empathy with the customers and tell more stories. And you can help your pre-sales team have the courage to talk to customers more and to tell stories and get away from features. And you can help sales have a brain. I'm just kidding. Sales is always craving knowledge. They want information, and product marketers are perfectly suited to give this information. So now, when we think of this group, and when I think of this loving band of characters, they're not just supporting players in this movie. They are the stars, right? But so was the wizard. And so when we think about this, when we think about evangelism, we can break it down really into two types. There is the community evangelism. This is where your entire organization is spreading a message. And you're all working together to take the same narrative, to take the same message, but in your own unique way. And then there's the dedicated, which is actually what I do. I'm a dedicated evangelist, right? So part of my job, or core part of my job, is going out and spreading our message, doing podcasts. We'll talk about that a little bit. But first, if you're just getting started, community is an easy way to get going. So let's talk about what the heck that means. What the community is, and the opportunity that the community evangelism program provides, is the opportunity to multiply the message, right? Today, if you are putting out a press release, how long does that press release live in the market where people actually are reading it? Maybe 3-4 days before, maybe 4 hours. Depends on how interesting you are, right? And if you are putting out a social post from your LinkedIn company page, how many people see it? Depends on how big you are, how big your page is. LinkedIn company pages actually have one of the worst reach possible in all of social platforms. So when you think of company messaging, marketing messages, right, they tend to be thrown out into a small echo chamber of employees who follow the company page, sometimes some industry people, and that's about it, right? So the community evangelist allows then to create a multiplying effect. Because if I can send out a message that could be a launch, it could just be some narrative, it could be a story, it could be a case study, whatever that is, and then the sales team picks that up, and then they go and each one of them add their spin. Say you have 20 salespeople, right? That's 20 times that message is getting amplified out there. And then if the CSM team does the same thing, right? So you can see the power of being able to build on that. Now, what a lot of people do is they write a boilerplate social post, and then everybody posts the exact same thing, okay? So the requirement to actually have what we'll call community evangelism is you need to be able to teach them to enhance their storytelling, right? We're gonna work with them to add their own spin to it. Take the core message, right? So let's use an example. We're launching and this works for B2B, and this works for B2C, though it's a little different when you're in B2C. But let's say B2B, you're launching a new feature, okay? It's not a Dreamforce level, because she's sitting down front, so I'm going to pick on her. It's not a Dreamforce level event. It's something that is important to your customers. People have been asking for it, but a press release is probably not going to get picked up. So let's talk about it. Let's tell a story. Let's tell a story about a pain point that a customer had. You don't even have to name them if you don't have a quote. Just what is that pain? Where are they coming from, right? And if you put that message out there and you teach sales how to then add their spin to it, right? Every one of them, they love to talk. If you've worked with the salespeople, they like to talk. They like to add their version to it and their flair, and all of a sudden, this becomes folklore. And it becomes this message that just gets repeated, and they talk about it in customer meetings, and they post about it on social. When you give them permission to tell a story, and you show them how, they will do it. Absolutely will do it. Most salespeople forget to do it, though. So when you're working on enhancing storytelling, one is you need to be the champion of the story. Give them some frameworks, and we'll talk about what some of those frameworks might be in a little bit. Give them some frameworks, give them some ideas, give them some examples, and then remind them to do it every once in a while. We use a program at Treasure Data called Post Beyond, which is a kind of distributed social platform. So our marketing team can write messages. The sales team, the CSMs, anybody in our organization can then use that to post to Twitter, to LinkedIn, and share a message. That in of itself is a great way to get your social posts out there. Where we take that a step further is now saying, hey, don't just take this, add your flavor. Put a story before it. Share it with a specific customer and say, I thought of you, whatever. Tweak it a little bit. Enhance that to a story, not just a feature. And what ends up happening is you end up as a company having a real voice. Because at the end of the day, people buy from people. We buy from people we like or from brands that feel good to us, right? And the easiest way to feel good to somebody is by them having a personal connection. So when your salespeople, when your CSMs, when your marketing team, when your whoever in your organization is out there sharing a story, telling how, if it's something especially they're really passionate about, how that feature may, the product team, that feature may actually solve some bigger problem, right? Being able to add that angle to it all of a sudden gives your brand not just here's the corporate static boring messaging, but a voice and a conversation in the marketplace. So that's a starting point. But where you get real gains and where you get real opportunity is really if you are giving somebody, even halftime, dedicated opportunity to get out and talk often. And the funny part is when I go out and I talk, and I'm doing it today, I don't necessarily talk about customer data platforms, right? That's what I sell, but I sell to marketers. So my job is actually to go out and talk to marketers about things that they're struggling with. What's going on with TikTok, right? What's going on in LinkedIn? Or how do you deal with first-party data? How do you deal with Google can't make up their mind about cookies going, like all these things that are bouncing around in marketers' heads, that's what I talk about. So whether it's on a podcast or whether that's on a webinar, trade show, events like this, those are opportunities just to build awareness of your brand. And so when you think about the dedicated, the opportunity really is that opportunity to build a brand, both personally, myself, I'm out and I can talk and people know me, but then that translates into our company. Because ultimately, one of our biggest challenges, I heard it said earlier, and I've heard it said, I was fortunate enough to be at the Product Marketing Summit in San Francisco as well, and it was always awareness, especially in B2B, but even more in B2C as budgets are getting tightened, as ads are harder, as everything gets more complicated and convoluted and there's more noise in the marketplace, the more opportunity you have to build a brand. And that doesn't just necessarily mean the creative, it means the story behind it. And there's many, many facets of that you can create. The more opportunity you have as another way to get into the hearts and the minds of your customers or your prospects. But more importantly, selfishly, let's talk about that for a second, it helps you as well. We're in a funky job market right now, right? Like you have some companies that are hiring and acquiring, you have other companies that are laying off. It's tough. And if you're out there selling yourself and building a brand, that's good. That's a good thing, right? Because though you're the people who are going to get job offers, you're going to be the people who have a network that you're not just asking. Because I've been giving for the last year, right? I've been giving and putting out content and sharing and talking and giving stuff away. And so if I need to go ask something of my network, they're there. I haven't been taking the entire time, right? I'm not just showing up on LinkedIn when I want to announce my new job or when I want to, if I get laid off or if something happens, right? So being able to get out and share, just start posting, start getting content out there. And all it means is all you have to do that is have a point of view. Have a point of view about something. And that could be your day job, right? So as product marketers, we do a lot of things. We have a lot of knowledge that we can share that actually is applicable to a lot of people, right? There's a lot of things we can teach a pre-sales org about creating connections, about rapport, about messaging, about narrative, right? Not just features and events. We can help sales. We can help. So all of those people who are out there in the ether who potentially could be customers of you, right? Those are all people who are willing to hear what you have to say if you take a point of view. So, doesn't have to be about your company. That's the biggest. If you forget this entire presentation, you walk away and you get on a plane and you're like, you have 3 Jack and Cokes on the flight home because you hate flying, whatever. Remember this one little thing. You don't only have to talk about your company. Your social platforms, your message, your voice is actually better when you're talking about things that you care about and that matter to you, that matter then to the audience that you're trying to attract. Okay? So, use your company message sparingly, 10% of the time. The rest of the time, use your point of view. And the outcome is revenue. I did a LinkedIn Live a random LinkedIn Live a few weeks ago and drove over $500,000 in pipeline. No plans to drive pipeline out of this event. It just happened to, there was a little luck. I won't say every one of them is going to do that, but we were talking about a topic that was interesting to somebody, and they were actually having this conversation, saw the post, got shared up through the chain, and they requested a demo. I had positioned this LinkedIn Live as a mid-funnel accelerator, right? Like, hey, we're going to talk about specifically, it was CDP, implementing a CDP when, I don't remember what the topic was. Implementing a CDP when you have limited resources, right? So when your budgets or your staff are smaller, right? So how do you do that? Very simple topic, and it was meant to be kind of a mid-funnel content. But that was somebody that they were scared to get started because that's what they were worried about. And they watched the LinkedIn Live and said, hey, these guys are talking about things that matter to us. I never once talked about how treasure data worked. I never mentioned really ultimately what a CDP was, other than maybe a quick blurb at the beginning just to kind of level set. But there was no product demo. There was no pitch. There was nothing else. It was all about like, hey, I'm assuming you know this, but let's talk about some tips that we've learned along the way. And we walked away with revenue. I go to trade shows and events and I talk to customers. Who here actually goes and works trade shows and events at all? Awesome. Who likes to do it? That's funny. I'm actually an introvert. This is the funniest part. I'm an introvert. Like when I'm done, I go home, I go back to the hotel room, I'm gonna eat some chocolate, I'm gonna watch TV, I'm gonna doom scroll through TikTok just to get some dopamine back in my system. Like I'm an introvert. But I love talking to people when we're like sharing. It's the small talk at conferences that drive me nuts, I think. But I love getting out there and talking to our customers because I can test our message 30, 40, 50 times in a day. I can iterate. I can try something else. I can say it a different way. I can watch in their eyes when they light up or when they change or whatever. And I guarantee I beat all of our ADRs when I go to events or SDRs, BDRs, whatever you call them, sales development reps. I beat all of them at demo signups. Because I don't just hand out materials and talk features. I talk about what's their problem. Half the time I don't even talk about what our product is, because they're at our booth, I assume they kind of know. I tend to talk about them. And then we talk about something, and by the time we're done, we're like, hey, we should continue this conversation. Let's set up a demo, and I'll join it. I didn't even ask them to join, and they're like, oh yeah, let's do that. It's because I built a point of view, I had a message, and I connected with them. So, think about it in this regard, like I said, if you think of nothing else, having a point of view and having a message that resonates with your audience does not have to be about your product. Now, what's the day in life? What do I do? Like everybody, that's my other topic I tend to get people like, evangelist, that sounds cool. What the hell is it? Well, so activities, I spend a majority of my time, I do content creation. I write blog posts. I do a lot of internal decks and presentations like we all do. But typically I do them I take a feature deck and I turn it into a story. I give a talking point. I pull some stuff out of our case studies and I talk about how this problem solution equals this, and I put a customer, for example, in the middle. So I'll say that again. This problem, customer did this, is my for example. So if you are doing messages and you're talking to your customers, for examples are your favorite friend. So anytime you're talking, you give an example or you talk about something, you're like, for example, X customer did this, and when they saw this problem, they did Y. Again, I'm not really talking about the product. I'm talking about how somebody used it and then drove an outcome. Podcasts, webinars, events, live and video. I spend a lot of time in my office on the camera or on mics, or we've started doing podcasts lately, guesting on a series of those, videos. We're right now working on a Ask Us Anything series. So I'm doing 3-minute videos that customers tend to ask. You guys do webinars? And there's always if you have a good webinar, there's 5 or 10 questions, and maybe 1 or 2 of them are applicable to the entire crowd, and then there's 7 or 8 of them that are so niche and specific. But then when you ladder them up, they all kind of bubble together, right? So if you think about that, that's basically what I'm doing. Is I'm pulling out all those ones that you won't maybe necessarily answer on a webinar because you're out of time at the end, or it's and I'm doing a 1-2-minute video on it. and they're all going to be on LinkedIn. They're all going to be on YouTube. And it's just going to be an opportunity for people we know people hate talking to salespeople. Like, that's just a given. They tend to be about 60, 70% of the way through the buying cycle before they get to us. So the more opportunity I can give them to answer some of those questions before they get to me, or before they get to our sales team, the better positioned we are to be the vendor of choice when it comes to the sale. And LinkedIn. I spend a ton of time on LinkedIn. But here's the beauty. I batch it. When my CEO gets on, we get on calls, and every time he says, "Man, every time I open up social, I see you." And I'm like, yes, doing a good job. Whether it's working or not, perception alone of that is worth it. And our CRO says the same thing. But I just batch it. In the morning, I do a post, and then I spend about 5 to 10 minutes engaging and commenting on other people's in our niches posts. 5 or 10 minutes. And then at lunch, I do about the same thing. And in the afternoon, I tend to post again. Not always, sometimes. Mornings tend to be my longer posts. Afternoons tend to be my shorter, or I'll post a picture. Today, I think I've reshared the PMA post, and I posted a picture of the Macy's flags outside saying, "I'm in Chicago to speak today." That's it. Those are my posts. And that's all I'm going to do because I'm going to drive home after this. So don't kill yourself thinking, overthinking this. Just by being out there and being consistent, I'm building rapport and I'm building a community of marketers. Now, the tools, what do I do? How do I do this? So I do a lot of video. Right now, there is a massive shift in all social, and we're moving towards the idea of the attention or the interest-based graph, right? So TikTok came in and screwed up everybody's social media plans, and basically now you find people who do one video and get 1 million views, right? Like that world didn't exist before because you had to have followers, you had to have all these people who were there first before you got that virality. Now you can post a video and it goes. Well, everybody's starting to adjust their algorithms to go into that idea. We're starting to see a lot more interest-based promotion, even on LinkedIn, even in, obviously, Instagram Reels. They're a copycat of everything anybody else does because Mark Zuckerberg wants his money. And if you work at Meta, I love it. I actually am very bullish on Metaverse, just not with the me emoji cartoon version. In the future, it'll be cool. But short-form video is a very easy way to get content out there, and it works really well. Long blog posts on your page that you are trying to drive attention to, people don't care. Like, they don't want to click through. They want what they're calling zero. Have you guys heard the phrase zero-click content? Right? Zero-click content is in-feed, where you don't put it behind a gate, you don't send them off to another page to get the information, you don't tease it, all the information's right there, right? So zero-click is, I'm going to give you the entire blog post within my LinkedIn post, or I'm going to give you all of the knowledge for the hook or the headline that I gave you right within the video, and I'm posting it on the platform. Producing zero-click content is a fast and easy way to build your content marketing strategy and build your rapport with your audiences because they're not ready yet to commit to even going to your website, and they sure as heck probably aren't ready to fill out a form to download that white paper that they're never going to read anyway. So using, big on video, I use Evernote, ClickUp, Notion as my kind of second brains. It's kind of a mess. I love Notion. I find myself procrastinating because I always tweak it and change it, and so I've been forcing myself. Evernote is my notes and ideas. ClickUp is a kind of a task management, and I use it to manage and track all of my content. I have automations in there for when I post things, I can track everything in there. If you've never heard of Descript, go get Descript. It is an amazing video editor. It's basically like using Google Docs in video editing form. I load a video up there, it transcribes it, I can go highlight a selection of text that I don't like, cut it, throw it away. I can remove filler words. I know my filler words. I use so and right all the time, and I guarantee I've used them today. And that's just who I am. I just use the script and I take them out. And it's really easy. You do not have to be a video editor. You can add captions. You can knock it out. So just these rapid fire, low production value. There's always time for the big, high, glossy, bring in a video crew times. But in honesty, like, who's done a video recently with a video crew? Like, well, I figured the Salesforce people do, but okay. They take time. We it's 3 months of like working on a script and then getting the team, and then you're doing it, and then you got to edit it, and then 7 people want input and feedback on said video, and then you end up reshooting a part of it, and then by the time you actually put it out live, I mean, we're guilty of this too, so I'm not picking on Salesforce. Like, by the time you put it out live, like, the moment's gone. Right? And so save those for those evergreen pieces that are going to last forever. Use the quick lo-fi for topical, for interest-based. Get them out there and just keep people engaged. It's a great way to also, if you go back to that community-based volume idea, get your pre-sales people. Get them in front of a camera and let them talk for a minute or two. You can edit something good out of it. Get them, get your CSMs and have them talk about a customer. Have them talk about a win that again, you don't even have to name the customer. Have them talk about that, or have them talk about a new product, come out and talk about a new market and trim it down and talk about, like, what are we solving for? What are we going to do for this new category, this new market? Again, don't have to always talk about the product. Canva's fun. GoPro, I literally take this with me everywhere when I travel. This is the new one, the Hero Black. It's got a battery controller. I take video clips. The cool thing about this is and this is not a commercial for GoPro. I don't make any money for doing this. It shoots in 8:7 format, which basically means it's like a big fancy square, but they do it in 5.3K. Which all that means is I can do vertical video and horizontal and landscape, so portrait and landscape, at the exact same time. So I shoot one video, I can crop it as a square for LinkedIn, I can crop it as a 16:9 for YouTube, and I can crop it as a tall video for Instagram Reels or TikTok, all from the same video shoot. So great way to create some easy, fast content. It's a few $100. And your kids love it. If you have kids, like my 7-year-old, like, runs around and makes videos in her free time. So charge the batteries. I use a Sony a6400 as my webcam and as when I do live video and whatnot. It's a mirrorless DSLR or mirrorless camera, and a Rode microphone. So upgrading your tech matters. It looks better. It sounds better. It's important. So these are small changes that can have a big impact. And again, LinkedIn. I use Sales Navigator all the time to find prospects and target and people who are posting, who are in my ICP. If you're not in LinkedIn Navigator or Sales Navigator, go get a license from your sales team. You can go say, I want to find product marketers who are in this company size, this revenue range, who've posted on LinkedIn in the last 30 days. And then I'm going to go look at their profile. If they say that's my target market, I'm going to go look at their profile. I'm going to comment on one of their posts. I'm going to follow them. And and then eventually they tend to look at your post. They follow you. They see your content. It's a great little cycle. So what have I learned? What have I learned through doing this job? One thing that I've learned is when you start creating content, everybody wants you to create content. So this is the challenge, right? So the content marketing team comes to me all the time. Hey, you want to write this blog post? You want to do this video? You want to do this, whatever. Our product teams, hey, can you record a demo for me? And I generally like to say yes, right? I want to say yes as much as I can. But you've got to manage your calendar. You've got to manage your time. And you've got to plan. I plan quarterly. This is what I'm going to do. These are my big buckets. These are my movable objects. So trade shows, events, launches, things that I know that I can't move. And then I put in things that are not in my control. Podcasts, webinars, things that are like partners that I'm slotting those in. And then I say, okay, what's left? How much time can I do to this? How much time can I do to that? And I just I time block it. I'm not as far along as I would love to be, which is the idea of saying I'm going to dictate X amount of time to this team and X amount of time to this team, just because they're not as as like they all come at me at kind of different times and at different cadences, so it's not super predictable. So it's not like, oh, okay, I'm going to give content marketing 8 hours, this month, and I'm going to give them, because it's all over the board. But ideally, in a perfect world, I'd like to start to allocate kind of quotas so that we can have internal resources know that like, hey, I can't just write blog content for you all day long because that's boring. So. The other big thing I have learned is there's an amazing community of people out there doing this exact same thing. Whether they have the title of evangelist, whether they're a salesperson who just have kind of figured this out, whether in their product marketing, go out there and find them. Go out there and meet them. Find the other influencers, and I don't even mean like the fancy influencers. I just mean people who are sharing and influencing thought in your category, in your space, competitor or not. And share their content, like their content, talk to them. Because what goes around comes around, right? So as I'm posting things, people are sharing things, and it works back and forth. And I think I'm running out of time here. So now that I've kind of given you, maybe you walk away with this and you're like, yes, we're going to go home and we're going to do this. We're going to try this, or we're going to think about this. So I want to give you a couple secrets of storytelling, ways you can wedge these in, even if you don't do an evangelism program, but you just want to kind of dial up storytelling a couple levels. So I've got a few of them on here, and we'll just go through them. And if you got questions, I'll share my LinkedIn at the end. You guys can connect with me. I'm always happy to talk about how to implement these. But let's kind of go through them. First, you have to make stories human. B2B marketers are the worst at making something sound like it was written by an AI robot, even though those aren't very good yet. B2B marketers have perfected that. Just copy our text and you've got AI robot text. It is bland, it's boring, it's full of jargon, and it was written by 12 people, right? That's the reality. Stop doing that. Make it a human. Add a human element to it. Right? When I told you I'm an introvert, right? And when I recently hosted our CAB event, we actually did a unique kind of style for CAB where it wasn't just like us sitting there and sucking information out of their brains. It was really around our customers getting together and networking. So we kind of blended this customer event mixed with this, feedback session. And one of the things I said right at the beginning of the first day was I was doing a little icebreaker because we were going to make everybody kind of network first so they got to know each other so they're more free. And I said, I'm an introvert, and I guarantee statistically there's other introverts in this room. So at any point as you're talking and whatever, you get tired, grab me, we'll go in a corner, we'll scroll on our phones, and we'll pretend we're talking to each other and everybody will leave us alone. And I just made this little story and I shared it. And it was honestly an afterthought. I was just trying to think of something to say on stage. For the entire, the rest of that day and the entire next day, people were using and referencing back to it. And they were linking back to it. And they were thinking about it, right? Even if they weren't, they're like, no, there's no way you're an introvert. I'm like, well, yes, because I'm going to go to my hotel room, and I'm going to eat some chocolate, and I'm going to watch TV, and I'm going to fall asleep, because that's what happens. I've been doing this long enough. I know my routines. And they... but it was just one little human element. I think when Tim from Oracle was up here, he said, hey, sorry to switch my schedules. I got to go to my kids' theater performance. Anybody who's a parent in here has experienced that. I've had to change my schedule because of something my kids did. And immediately, he became more human to you. Even if you didn't realize that at the moment, he became more human. He was not just a speaker, he was a dad. So any opportunity you can take to add a human element to your story. When I was in that role, I felt the same pain, right? Anything you can add to that story to make it not some corporate babble, but a human speak is going to make your stories, your conversations, your messaging better. Number 2, you have to include triggers. Just putting words on page don't matter. Triggers. What is a trigger? A trigger is something that invokes an emotion or a psychological response. We'll talk about 2 of them, but I'm also going to give you a link. You can download my list. I've got 7 of them that you can steal. They're easy to use. Everybody can use them. Number 1 on that list is fear, right? Fear is an emotion that is primal and deep within us, and it doesn't matter who you are, everybody experiences fear in some fashion. That could be, I'm actually physically scared, fight or flight, or that could be fear of missing out. I fear that I'm not going to get something, right? FOMO, as the kids call it these days. But the fear of not being included, the fear of not having, the fear of the pain that comes with that. If you attach that to your messaging, I guarantee you will get a response. And in marketing, good response, bad response, that's what you want. You want a response, right? Because otherwise what ends up happening is people just ignore it. So any kind of response you can get is better. Politicians, both sides of the coin, use fear all the time, right? When you start to look at these triggers, you start to watch messaging, you start to realize how people use these. It works because it works quickly. If you put up a fear element very quickly, people look in very closely because they want to know, how do I react to this, right? Your brain is hardwired for fight or flight. Do I lean in and engage, or do I get the hell out, right? And so by triggering those fear emotions, it immediately puts people in a position of paying attention to what you're saying so that they can process and engage it. How many people have driven all the way home one night and never even realized how you got there, right? You're on autopilot. Now take that same trip the next night. You can be on autopilot and all of a sudden a deer runs across the road. In that moment, all of your focus comes back. You know how fast you're going, you know where everything, and you start to react. Do I need to turn left? Do I need to turn right? All of your internal processes engage. Now, it doesn't have to be as dramatic as that, but basic elements of fear will connect your audience to your message. The other one is belonging. We all want to belong to something. We all like to belong to something bigger than us, right? So whether that is a movement, whether that is a message, whether that is a community. I'm so tired of picking on Salesforce, but they're right here. Trailblazers. Like the Trailblazers is their community, and they've given it a name, and it's branded, and it's brilliant because it gives this sense of community. And you can progress through, and belonging and fear of missing out when you stack them together is what a loyalty program is all about. Right? I want to belong to something, but I don't want somebody else to have something better. And there's a third one that actually makes them even better. But when you start to stack them, you double your results. So we want to belong to something bigger than ourselves. I've got 7 of these that I'll share with you. There's a QR code at the end. You can steal them. Use them. How many people have heard of the hero's journey? So the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, it's basically every sci-fi movie you've ever seen. Star Wars, Star Trek, all of them pretty much use the same format, which is the reluctant hero goes out and learns some things along the way, and then becomes the hero. And then there's a moment of low, and they're like, I can't be the hero. I don't want to be the hero. Like, this is not for me. And then somebody's like, oh, you got to be the hero. And they're like, okay, fine, I'll be the hero. And then they step up to be the hero, and then they win, and then they triumph, and then they go home a victor. And that is the 6-second version of it. Now, here's the reality. I guarantee you, especially in the B2B crowd, you've heard say, use the hero's journey as a messaging framework. Use it to tell a story. I guarantee somebody in here, because I've talked to marketers about it. The problem is, if you don't have a villain, you can't have a hero. You have to have an enemy in order for there to be a hero. So, if you're doing marketing and you're talking about the hero and the triumphant hero, and you didn't know this, but now you know this, and so therefore you can do this amazing thing, that's cool. But it really doesn't matter because you didn't introduce the villain that they had to defeat. Okay? So, in your messaging, you've got to be a little bold. You've got to set up a hero. One of the brands that I love right now that is doing really cool stuff is a company called Liquid Death. Liquid Death is a water company. They do sparkling and still water. It is in an aluminum can, and their tagline is "Murder Your Thirst," and they are all against eliminating plastic. That is the movement, right? We don't need single-use plastics. Aluminum is infinitely recyclable, so everything's in a can, but they are just a cool brand too. One of the things that they did is, using storytelling, is they introduced two things. One is the idea of a villain. They actually have a horror movie that is about people going into the woods, and they use plastic, and they are murdered, because it's a horror movie, they're murdered one by one in the woods. So, the idea, though, was the plastic is the evil. Plastic is the villain, because it's just water, right? At the end of the day, it's just water. It's the most commoditized item in the world, but they've added a story to it, right? And they give people belonging by being part of the community to see, you see how these things all work together. So, hero's journey does not work if there's not a villain, and more importantly, you are not the hero. As the brand, you're not the hero. Your customer is the hero. They are reluctantly moving through the process and learning something along the way and defeating the challenge. It's not that you were the hero by no. And I've seen that done too many times. You are the wise sage who's going to guide them on their journey, right? You're the Yoda to Luke Skywalker, but you are not Luke Skywalker as much as you want to be, okay? I would like to be Luke Skywalker. That would be cool. Use the right voice. And I'm not just talking active voice, passive voice. I'm talking, when you think about, there are character archetypes you can use in storytelling, okay? Number one, I could be a narrator, right? A narrator is a disinterested party who's just guiding you through the story, versus the wise sage who's giving you information along the way. There are different voices. If you're in B2C and you've got a customer, a retail associate who's working at a store, like, they may not have the credibility to be the Yoda, right? Your SDRs probably don't have the credibility to be the wise sage who's giving them information. They haven't been in their footsteps necessarily, right? So switch it. They're the narrator. They're explaining how this story goes. They're opening you up and drawing you in and saying, but I'd like to introduce you to somebody who can show you even more. The wise, so if you start to think about the voice that you're using and the character, you have to be able to play a believable character in your story. I came from marketing. I can talk to marketers, right? I have that credibility. But if I didn't, in fact, I think Tim, I'm stealing his stuff too, but he talked about when he was sitting in that meeting when they were talking about Justin Bieber. He didn't come at it from like, hey, I think this is a PR nightmare. He came at it from as a salesperson, right? And so he became that advisor in his lane. And so again, think about your messaging, think about the voice that you're using, and most salespeople need to switch into narrator mode. They're guiding somebody, they're telling the story, they're laying out the steps, what's going to happen, but they're not necessarily the wise sage. And the last one is emotion over logic. This is the most important one. We buy things and engage with things emotionally, and we rationalize them logically, right? So we first have to have an emotional reaction to something, a pain that we want to solve, a gain that, an opportunity that we're missing out on. Those are the reasons why we engage, even in B2B. Actually, even more importantly into B2B, because we tend to be disengaged parties when we're buying software, right? So if you think about when you've gone through a buying process, and you're on that side, you're on the receiving side of the demo, or you're on the receiving side of the pitch, right? It's not your budget, it's not your money. You don't really care necessarily until they say something that's interesting to you. Until they show you something. Oh wow, this is a way to make my job easier, or this is a way to solve I don't have to work after 6 o'clock every night just to get this done because they can do it for me. Sweet, I'm in, right? That emotional appeal is way more important than any fact, figure, logic. We're the fastest, we're the best, we're the bleh, right? That's B2B speak. We still do it. I still do it. You have to do it sometimes. You can't completely dismiss logic, but lead with emotion. So I told you, I promised the 7 triggers. That you can connect with me on LinkedIn. It all goes to the same stuff. You can download the 7 triggers. If you need help figuring out how to use them, feel free to message me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share. I've just started a kind of a little newsletter on LinkedIn called The Storyteller's Edge, just talking about how we're adding some science back into storytelling to give you guys as marketers an edge in the noise. So all of those things are free. I'm not selling anything. I enjoy doing this. It's just a fun thing. So with that, I leave you with one message. Your job is to create a message good enough to lead your customers down the yellow brick road, because you want everybody in the land saying the same message, which is follow the yellow brick road. So that is your job as a marketer, is to connect that emotion. Everybody goes to the same destination. They all go for a different reason. But again, you all want to anchor around the same message. Follow your yellow brick road. So with that, I know I'm over time, but if we have questions, I'm happy to take them.
First of all, I think we need a round of applause for bringing the energy to the last session. There are a couple of questions. If anybody wants to raise their hand as well, you're more than welcome. There we go, we've got a couple. So, an evangelist sounds like a content creator. How are your goals different?
Yeah. So, content creation to me is around the content. Content is a big part of what I do, but my job at the end of the day is revenue. I drive pipeline and I drive revenue. So I'm creating content. I'm doing messaging. I'm taking that information and I'm feeding what I'm learning by going to the trade shows and going to the events and the feedback I get from my content, and it goes right back into our pipeline, right? So it goes back into the loop. So I would say it's a content creator on steroids. It is a content creator who is not just going for likes and metrics, but is actually now trying to tie that to revenue and create that feedback, that loop with your audience.
Yeah, that's a good differentiation. And this is an interesting one. If an evangelist makes a career move, how does that impact credibility in the new role?
So it's great. So here's the thing. If I left Treasure Data today and I went somewhere else, I'm only going to be credible talking to marketers. I've been in MarTech for 15 years. I started with CRM. I did marketing automation. I am now in CDP. Eventually, I'm gonna talk about the metaverse someday. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. That's probably what's next, right? Because we're all gonna have to wear chips in our heads, but it doesn't matter because I'm gonna talk to marketers when I do that, right? So when I go and I talk to marketers, most of my content is around storytelling. It's around copywriting, it's around persuasion, it's around the psychology of all of it, and how marketers can leverage that. So that translates. I move along. I'm just taking my brand with me, and in fact, it actually is going to work well because somebody's going to pay me more at some point in time to go and do it for them because it works. We can go back to the QR code when we're done with questions.
Yep. So yeah, next one up, how do you test your stories or messaging and not get distracted by too many cooks in the kitchen?
Yep. So we have two lines. We have what we call company produced content, and then I have Zach produced content. Zach produced content is I just put it out there. I'm trying stuff on my personal social channels where I'm talking about things that I think matter and resonate. So that is nobody gets influence on that. I have my own personal rules on like how I do that. I don't call out customers. I don't call out prospects, and I try not to bash people who I think either could be a customer or prospect or are competitors. Right? Like those are my personal ethics. But it's not like nobody dictates what I do on that. On the company-produced stuff, we have our messaging frameworks, we have our story guides. I've written a lot of them, and so when I go out and I do a podcast and I'm talking, I was just on one the other day and we were talking about performance marketing. I'm using that, but I'm just telling the story and I'm trying different things and I'm getting their reaction, and then we adjust and we iterate and we fix our messaging, because my goal then is to take that messaging that's working and now disseminate it amongst the sales team. Right, so I get to be the guinea pig. I get to be the one who tests the content and then pushes it out.
Cool. This one just disappeared. Oh no, it's still there. But I really liked it. In your eyes, what is the difference between evangelism and lead gen?
So lead gen is a function, right? That is basically saying, hey, you're ready to sign up to give us your name, to give us whatever, and generally, most people MQL fairly quickly after lead gen anymore because like they've been engaging content for a long time prior to that. My job is I look at two buckets in kind of how I produce content. One is very top of the funnel. I'm putting content out there. I'm just talking to marketers. Again, 6 months from now when they're like, oh, I've got a problem. Like I saw that guy from Treasure Data, I should call them, right? Like I've got a CDP problem and I know him. So I'm very early top of the funnel, and then I'm also doing a lot of like they're already in our bucket. So when I'm a lot of our webinars, a lot of the videos I produce, a lot of the stuff is really at accelerating our sales cycle. In CDP, we're 6 to 9 months, give or take. Sometimes it's 1 quarter, but generally it's an enterprise sales cycle. It takes a while. So my job is to keep people engaged. I try to build some credibility so that we are not. Just like when anybody who's managed a sales team, you don't want to be single-threaded in that account. I don't want them to be single-threaded in our account. I don't want them just to be connected to the salesperson or just connected to the salesperson and the SE. Like an opportunity to connect with myself or any of our other leaders is just more opportunity for them to feel. It creates that human connection. So a lot of my content, I'm hoping to create that connection either organically or through our salespeople sharing it, or giving stuff and creating messaging that others in the org, CSMs, our leadership team can share and talk about. So.
Awesome. Right. One last question. If there's a common thread, this is it. Everybody is super busy. So what is a realistic top tip to start your evangelism journey without just a ton more workload?
Yep. One, just start. Like I decided earlier this year that I was going to test TikTok. So I decided I'm going to do TikTok videos mainly because I talk to marketers and I want to be able to say, hey, this is I've tried it, I've done it, I've uploaded videos, I've gotten reviews. Like I can have a credible conversation, right? I'm always in that continuous learning mode. I spent 3 weeks thinking about creating a TikTok video. Right? Like, I mean, and this was after I committed. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then I spent 3 weeks like, okay, I'm going to do it. What's the perfect background? And then finally I'm just like, phone, record, done. And in fact, actually, I did it at the PMM summit in San Francisco in my hotel room. I did my first video there. And I just posted it. And that's just start. Your first stuff's probably going to suck. And that's okay. Like, it's totally fine. Because in a year, nobody's going to remember it, and by then you've been doing this for a year. So just get some content out there. Do 1 post a day. Start a post in the morning. Start a post, in the afternoon. If you have some dead time, I walk often. Well, when it's not snowing, I walk to pick up my daughter from school. So I've got like the 10-minute walk to. Sometimes I listen to a podcast. A lot of times I just do a quick. I can fire off a quick. 2 or 3, you'd be surprised how fast you can create content if you aren't going through 50 channels. I can do a LinkedIn post, and then I can take a clip from that LinkedIn post, and I can put it on Twitter, and then I can, and then I can take a video. I mean, there's so much you can do in a very quick amount of time. Just do something. You don't have to do 500 pieces of content, in a quarter. Like that's, 1 post a day. Start.
Awesome. Thank you for being so generous with your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we go back? Can we switch back to the QR code?
Yeah, if we could put the last slide up with the QR code, that would be awesome.
There we go. Yep. There it is. Okay.
Perfect.
We'll leave that up. If you guys have any questions that you didn't ask, I'll stick around for a few minutes afterwards too. Thank you.